All right, check 1, 2. Hey, what is up, guys? And welcome to my live stream here. I am live. I am live both on Twitch and on YouTube. So, much love. You know, really great, really great that you're doing this. Yeah. So I'm gonna be doing a creepypasta reading here, because I heard that's what gets people's attention is yapping and all that. I have creepypasta.com, which is basically a site for pasta that is creepy. I have no idea what else I'm going to be saying for this video, so prepare to be scared soon as I send out more of my, you know, oh shit. Can you wear your glasses on the tip of your nose? Sure, I'll grab them glasses. Is this good enough for you, sir? So, let me just, let's see. So, promo. Yeah, I'll get to it soon, so keep your pants on. And let's, perfect. Yeah, perfect. Cool. Q. Alright. Alright, let's just do this. Tell the tales. 1 minute. When I say 1 minute, I mean 1 minute. Alright? It means you wait your damn. You wait on a damn thing. Alright? For every character. Yeah, I'll make sure to do that, Logan. I'll, Alright. Alright, so. Oh, yeah. The Yellow Eyed Devils. I'm impatient. Need someone to read me a book before I go to bed. Logan, that's just you being spoiled, man. Jeez. Anyways. Here it is. The Yellow-Eyed Devils. Posted August 15th, 2025. Time 24 minutes. Adventure. Adventure is what I crave. I wanted to gain the fruits of life that I have so long been denied in my youth. And in those days, those fruits could be found and plucked in the American West. Real quick, do I have any pants on? Yes. Yes, if that's what you're wondering. Now, can I get on with my story? Thank you. All right. Oh, and this needs more atmosphere. Boom. Boom. All right, here it is. All right, you guys ready? All right, cool. Alright, let's continue. But if I had a hint of what would happen to me and my boys when I found that adventure, it would have made me never want to leave civilization. Advertisements. Of course, I've heard tales of Indians scalping and killing settlers, wild panthers and bears tearing men, women, and children alike. But the tale like you're about to hear often go deaf on the ears of the common folk. Those likely who want to settle the West like I did. If only they, if only they and I knew what deep dark horror lay in the old American West. Alright, yeah. Thank you. The four of us boys were riding on horseback, the hot sun hitting our backs like a match, lighting up small branches, cacti flanking us on all sides, constant fear of an Indian attack, always keeping us on alert. To my left was my best friend Thomas, a good boy, decently clean shaven, apart from the stubble he often sported. Knew the world of criminals, thieves, savages, and vagrants. Hell, so was I. To my right, traveling the group as usual, was Richard, a drunk who we only keep around 'cause he's good at hunting and fishing. He could tell a good joke here and there. His long, unkempt hair sitting uncomfortably on his broader shoulders. Then came our leader, John, a man whom I'd only had the greatest respect for. He had gentlemanly features. Features, combed parted hair from the left, and a nice trimmed mustache with shaven cheeks. And these deep set blue eyes, which sat handsomely under his brown eyebrows. And though Richard was the oldest out of us boys, it was John who was the most natural leader. He hadn't seen a lick of water or stream by the time the trouble started. Advertisements. Right as we're about to take a break after our day's labors, John spotted an object and told us to halt. At this point, in my inexperienced state of existence. This is epic, yeah. I didn't know what to expect in such a harsh, unforgiving place like the American West. We slowly approached the structure, John unholstering his revolver in case any trouble arose. We got to the mysterious device. The crew and I realized it was an abandoned wagon of some pitiable family who saw their end, more likely taking form in the scalping that I hear the papers talk about. It's pretty run down, boys. Let's strip it of any usefulness, said John. I don't want to interrupt, but the way you're narrating is amazing. I feel like I'm in the story with the voices. Cool. When we pulled away the sand-ridden white tarp, however, the bones of 3 distinct family members lay there, the stench of death hitting us immediately. Have you ever thought about doing Audible? You could read these books for people on the road trips. I don't think Audible would want to hear from me. Sorry. All right. There lay three. There lay a family of three. So we thought, under the tarp, their faces torn and bones broken, and eyes, what's left of them, looking upon the heavens in their gaunt expressions, exhibiting the greatest dip, deepisms, deepisms the world had to offer at their point of demise and exit from out the world from whence they demised. Your voices and dictations are on point. Yeah, they're on point. Wouldn't say demise. We took whatever valuables late. Get to the part with the aliens, homie. We're not playing that game anymore, Andrew. We took whatever valuables laid with the perished, lies leaping over us like stuntmen over horses at a circus. Clothing, watches, ink, instruments, incongruent food scraps, whatever lay with that godforsaken family, we took, or thought was worth taking. Make sure and raise your voice with each character change. Come on, Andrew. Yeah, come on, Andrew. Seriously? We're not playing in the alien game anymore. Man. Though I noticed something particularly odd. Scratch marks. Not just those that the common grizzly bear would make, but an actual sign from another heathen dimension who's calling to our marks. I reckon that it was a sort of bandit of critters. Wolves, coyotes, maybe even one lone bear. Likely not man or men, responded John. My bad, homie. You're alright. Oh, well, I don't think any of them can do this. I've heard the stories of lions from Africa traveling with those traveling circuses and getting loose and mauling people and families, Richard in his usual day said. I interjected, saying that it's unlikely that a circus would travel through these uncivilized parts of the West. Then we heard the cry of Thomas, who ventured further up the trail and investigated whatever this crime scene had else to evidence. I love the deep voice. Oh, thank you. We ran over to seeing Thomas stepping slowly backwards towards our approaching direction. His tired eyes set upon whatever old ancient horror he uncovered. Stepping by his side, our firearms at our ready, we too gazed upon that same historic finding which culminated in our knowledge that there were more than 3 family members. 5, actually. Holstering our devices, holding our noses with our dirty fingers, We saw the bleached bone of the child stragglers. I feel like one of those voices should be Tiny Tim. Stop. Bro, no, not the Tiny Tim. I don't think my balls can get that deep into my insides. Holstering our devices, holding our noses with our dirty fingers, we saw the bleached bone of a child straggler. Yet, interestingly, with their organs plastered around the place, like a painting of monocre, mon, monarchical, monarch, monarchical, monarchical castle in Europe, furnished with the pale, dusty red blood of their forefathers that reflected the ever clear blue skies above. They're snoring. Great work. Cool. Sorry. Alright. Fending off the vultures and snakes and other animals that also did their own investigating, we noticed that there was a femur there, a rib there, and ulna there, a long, complete vertebrae strewn out upon a sun-hot rock, a sign straight out of an amount of a Jack the Ripper victim. Straight out of an account of the Jack the Ripper victim. Ripper victim. Oh yeah, I'm also live on Twitch if any of you are interested. Rock. A scene straight out of an account of a Jack the Ripper victim. Top of two sun-bleached skulls, along with their forgotten bottom mandibles, were organized like a compass in that dry dirt, north, east, south, west. Long fingernails, savage, or the Christian, or the partisan. I like Laura's. Doing Mojo. What the hell are you doing? Laura said you got a voice of an angel. Yeah, tell her I said thank you. Tell her I said thank you. Do a Mojo Nix. I don't even know who the hell that is. Oh, is it that dude you showed me one time? Oh, right, yeah. I don't think I can do that. It was then that I noticed those claw marks, the same back at the wagon, only a couple of paces away, dug into the sandy crevices that marked the ground with red grains, filling those crevices like lost swimmers and mariners who were thrown off their ships at mutiny. Oh, Elvis is. Oh, right, yeah. Now I remember. Alright, here we go. By the gods! I ain't seen nothing like this, not even from Indian savagery, exclaimed Richard. Thomas, in a quivering voice, said that this is not natural to this world. I put my arms around my friend. Suddenly turned where there was another noise, not from any man, but from our horses, who were whimpering and hollering like they'd seen the devil. We ran back to the wagon where we roped our horses or is this their hind legs kicking at some phantom spirit whose presence in these lands marked a mistake in God's ways. Richard looked around, exclaiming that there was an Indian above us in the canyon, staring at us, trying to make sense of the situation we're in, and started shooting at it until Thomas and I, in our infantile, infantile state, went along, unhoarded, unhoarded our revolvers, and shot the Indian, who we thought was an incarnation of a heathen. Once the Indian made haste away from the rocky canyon side, Captain John, as we call him now, Reverend, told us to hold our fire, that we should leave the premises. We followed our captain to a word, scrounging up whatever we needed for survival in these harsh, untrodden lands. Set forth we did, west, out of the canyon, and that wagon tomb trailing along behind the other members, only hoping for our dour survival. Oh yeah. Oh, am I Andrew? Yeah, that's cool. This may be my new favorite thing you've ever done. All right. Well, if this video gets at least 100 likes, maybe I'll do another one. It seemed that days, weeks, maybe even millennia went by before we felt safe enough to set up camp, passing by an old water well, by the way. The water evaporated like souls from the bodies of those who fought in all wars past. I agree. Yeah. The camp we made was bordered by rocks, one on two respective sides. Good repellent from the wild savagery that lay across the western lands. The trees, old and crushed in their old and vulnerable age, had their dry branches extended down into that dehydrated soil. Spiders, scorpions, snakes, rats, the whole lot of them, proving themselves to be greater nuisances than the Indians themselves. It was getting dark, so we knew we had to establish some sort of artisan fortification if we were to have a chance of survival in the lands of careless mortality. The campfire, stoked hot with the flames and inferno, provided some warmth to our unholy pilgrims to ventured into godless territory. The grub? Well, nothing except a coyote that old dick shot for us. Better than an Indian, I suppose. We decided to sleep in shifts that night to prevent any attacks, dissension with the local tribesmen. It would be John, our most noble knight and gladiator, who would take first watch. Then Richard, but who knew if he were to keep that promise of the protection of those accompanied by him. Who's old Dick? Oh, they probably mean Richard. They probably mean Richard. You want to read Laura? You know what? Yeah, get Laura in here. Get Laura in here. Get Laura. so exhausted from the day's extravagance that Dick Thomas, Dick, Thomas, and I slept as fast as a deer may run, and from a humble snap of a twig, perhaps as a way to escape the melancholy disposition and situation we find ourselves in. John looked longingly into the dark depths of that Arabian-esque desert, his left hand at rest on the officer's saber, with that southern drawl of his along that most stoic military, militaristic, militaristic nature. I couldn't help but think that he served under Jen Lee in the war between the states. She's gonna get tucked in, ready to read. All right. Well, I'm kind of more. I'm kind of real deep into the story here. I awoke the night still as dark as ever, the last flame of the fire breathing its last breaths before it extinguished into oblivion. Like all the pitiful souls of man would. Looking round, I saw that everyone, yes, including the most lamentable Richard, was asleep. Our guard down, my senses stinging with anxiety. I looked to my left, and perhaps because it was so dark, I could not see Thomas. Something seemed off. Then, with such a silence passion as to queer any mute, I heard the rattling whispers of Thomas, seemingly out in the distance. I stood up, believing this to be some foolish prank between two friends, but as those murmurs stood among the small breeze of the night, I knew something was off. I listened with great attention to the voice of Tom that came from the faraway cliffs, from the backs of those night creatures, from the low hanging branches of the millennia old trees, from my very soul. So entrancing was it, those voices, to where I couldn't help but walk away from the camp towards the likely source of my friend's gossip. The horses, who were stationed at a group of boulders a couple of meters away from us, were as the day previous, shrieking as if some demon into came into our world to torture the souls that denied them eternal paradise. "What the hell are you doing now?" hissed Thomas, awakened by the cries of our colts, turned over in his dark blanket. I was thus broken out of the trance that I was in place and realizing that I walked about 20 feet from our camp towards a hill where it was unknown what was on the other side of it. The other two woke up, looking at me, almost as dumbfounded as myself. Come on, son, you ain't abandoning us yet, are you?" said John with a low, deep voice. "Oh, let the boy take a piss, will you, Johnny boy?" replied Richard. "Well, you're supposed to be on watch at this hour. Weren't you supposed to be on watch at this hour, Richard?" questioned John with intensity. "Well, I suppose I let my fatigue get the better of me." I loomed there in the pervading still blackness, staring back at the wall, back with wide, tired eyes at my companions. "Are you okay now?" said Thomas, standing up from the makeshift bed. "Yeah, well, I swore I just heard your voice over that there hill, whispering and whatnot. I've been here, sleeping, until I heard the horses, for whatever reason, hollering likely because you were a disturbance to their rest." John squawked on his heels, yawning and just considering the fact that I was just weary of yesterday's events. Is this the Brokeback Mountain script? When does it get juicy? If by juicy do you mean is someone gonna die? Because I'm pretty sure that's what's gonna happen. John squawked. John squawked on his heels, yawning. From yesterday's events, and just that I was inebriated or something. Get some sleep, fellers. Journey to our Zion says with a the journey to our Zion said with a sarcastic tone, is not an easy, restful journey. I had no time, no reason to think about my eccentric actions. Thus, rest took me into her embrace. The next morning didn't provide much of an extravagance as did the night preceding it. Bygone winds of Neanderthal howled pervaded the lands, cactus bushing on our horses' legs, falcons and eagles swooping down to earn a meal of snakes. We passed by the occasional diplomat outhouse or former dwelling of a settler or Mexican family. The only thing on my mind, though, was the former night's trespasses into my soul. Does he get killed by AIDS? Don't spoil the ending. This is my first time reading it too, Andrew. So don't get your hopes up just yet. You know, this reading's actually kind of making me a little thirsty. Actually making me a little thirsty. I will be right back. And before you, um, no, no, I'm not giving one of the cowboys a gay accent. They're all brothers. They're all gamers. All right. By midday, we Argonauts, on a journey of brotherhood, silently drove through a small canyon, walls of bygone natural materials on each side of us. Never had I, and perhaps the others, felt so watched by a bushel of eyes, but from which species, or from what fauna, I have not known, until we saw the stoic natives observing us from high above. Again, just like the day previous, we saw a very similar sight. We hoisted our arms in defensive pose, but again, John told us to put down our arms, lest we incite greater conflict than we already had in an unknown land. What about this is a Western thing, man. This isn't Django and Jade where I have to say the N word with a hard R. God. Do not clip that. Whoever's on Twitch, do not clip that. A very similar thing. Holding up his right hand, blackened from skirmish and toil, he said in a calm yet defiant voice, We bring no harm to you or your people. We men are merely traveling ourselves. One of the two natives, the elder one, murmured something to the younger scout in their language. Proceeded to swivel their horses back, casting their shadows out of dehydrated sight. We, at the moment, did not know what to make out of this, as they did not seem visibly angry, nor discontented with our presence. But we could never be too sure. John led our band of pilgrims further through the canyon, which held so much history of the world, of men and beasts alike, in its bosom, a true wonder. When we were approaching the end of that ravine, right when the incline was just mere meters from us, the two natives rode their horses down to face us. Their faces, as stated before, not showing anger, yet still exhibiting caution and prudence. Richard, always ready for a fight, so much that he never holstered his six-shooter, yet rather rancorous. Rancorous, exclaimed John to the strangers, a hint of a smirk buried up in a corner lip. The young scout moved closer to us, eyes kept on John, except for a few quick glances at Thomas and I. The scout's horse's head was adjacent to John's, and the scout spoke in decent and clear English. White men don't belong. These lands are cursed.
Demons and spirits roam all around. You bring war, we maintain peace. White men make those spirits angry, and they will hunt you if you do not leave. Oh shit, did it? Oh shit, motherfucker. Thomas looked at me for a brief second, unable to process what he was saying. I had the same issue, but during those small intervals of sight between the scout and us, we, or at least I, noticed that the scout's left eye was peculiar off. It was a mix of those classic dark brown aboriginal eyes. Aboriginal eyes. But with a strong hint of a light peculiar green. Peculiar green. That, from my view, was the shape of a thunderbolt or arrow, a feature that was maybe odd for him. It made me sympathize more with his situation. "I don't disagree with you, sirs," replied John. "We're only passing by real quick, further into the zone of territory. Until we cross from here in New Mexico. Go quick then, and tell others not to come," said the scout. With that, the scout and the elder turned back, went up the incline, and disappeared out from our sight. Advertisement. "Now why the hell would you let that savage tell us what to do? Why would you defend him? Hit me for the sake. For their sake? Hit me for their sake? Hit me for their sake?" yelped Richard. "Well, Dick, I had no doubt that you've seen many of the despotisms that life has to offer. When you've seen the horrors of life existence that I've seen, even partaken in them yourself, you are quick to find that the white man can do so much to destroy each other than the Indian to the European." Calmly asserted John, looking down on the dirt, his cadence that of a stoic philosopher. We thus set our courses again to the west, the ominous word of the scout reminding us that we, rather than the Indians, are the heathens in unforgiving lands. Not too far from that encounter was Fort Wingate, where we band of travelers rested temporarily, obtaining foodstuff and other resources. We crossed the border into the Arizona territory, where out of sheer desperation we decided to take up camp soon, and that we could straighten our bearings after traveling miles and miles through dry, arid desert. We had done so long before, following the person in front of us like a line of ants, our heads hung low, watching various critters dart from the hooves of our horses. We spotted an odd-looking white structure ahead of us, clearly not the classical English-American style we were used to. John told us to stop where we were, As he would venture into the unique building that we slowly neared with skeptical inquiry. Fast did he and his horse go to it, only temporarily halting at the doors to the establishment were closed. But only queerly to the brown brown door was ajar, as if there were travelers like us who too had taken camp recently. Mere minutes after John and his horse entered this structure, he came out walking, opening the brown doors and raising his hand and whistling for us to approach. Once we were in imminent proximity with this edifice, our horses were disturbed by some unseen dark presence that surrounded it. It was only John's horse, that old stalwart war horse that was seemingly not disturbed. Sat disturbed by said dark, macabre energy. I too noticed that there were a dark gold cross. There was a dark gold cross that adorned the top of the doors, which communicated to us that it was an old Spanish mission, long forgotten as the old conquistadors themselves, but only to some. Once entering the mission itself, Thomas noticed that there were a multitude of scratches that decorated the doors themselves, as if there was a struggle not to keep something in, but out. However, we dare not allow these abhorred hints get to us. What we needed was not phantom ghost stories or supernatural stories, but rather much needed rest. I'm gonna eat an orange real quick. Yet after we dismounted our wearied horses, the more we looked around the mission, the more Yet after we dismounted our weird horses, the more we looked around the mission, the more we looked around the mission, the more disturbed the events that we supposed to occur there became. Pieces of wood, castle sacks, iron, chipped white paint from the walls. More crosses all became affixed in our view, as the place's holiness was corrupted by an immoral odious force. But if there was any one thing confined with those walls, half illuminated by the setting sun over us, it was no main roof of the mission, merely multiple small structures within its walls. It was the thing that was blocked by the crouched sign of John and Richard, who were curiously studying some wretched sitting object. Mm. Ugh. Sorry. The object, so it seemed, what it was a beaten skeleton of a situate priest situated in a dark corner of the mission. His clothes ripped, his bottom jaw snapped clean off. His rib cage was exposed as if some mountain lion had pursed its claws into the man, releasing his organs and blood and bones into the ground in front of him. Truly a grisly sight to behold. Near him was a hunting knife that he was attempting to use against his mysterious attacker, but to no avail. And a bronze crucifix was held in his right hand, a last-ditched attempt to ward off this satanic being. Mm. All right. All right. Hmm. You're the real hero tonight. Like like the Energizer Bunny. You keep going and going. Yay. Cool. Uh, uh. Mm. Thomas and I instinctively unholstered our revolvers, expecting a beast to prey upon us at any second after corralling us into its attack zone. But when looking around at the false pursuer, Thomas saw above the doors, but inside the mission rather than outside. Instead of a Christian cross, it was instead a deviant symbol. But just as we too were about to inspect it, our horses started howling and kicking up their hind legs, as if to fight an unseen foe that was near them, or us. Can we please make this a new thing? The Brony Book Club. We do books together on a night of your choosing. This is cool. Let's do it. Let's do the Saturday nights. Let's do the Saturday nights. Yeah, I would totally be down for Saturday nights here. Yeah. Dick, secure the horse. Dick, secure the horses. Nell, Bar, yeah, and they'll bar the door shut, commanded John. Thus, we did just that, with Richard on pulling on the harnesses of our disturbed stallions, and I running towards those scratch-stained brown doors, pushing as hard as I could in order to secure our survival. The wind stopped suddenly. We all at the same time noticed an eerie energy. An eerie energy was felt by by all, but unknown to all. However, since the sun was setting, we had no time to dwell upon our unforeseen circumstances. So, as Richard recommended, we gathered whatever in that place that could burn so we could start a nightlight fire. In the center of the plaza stood, or rather sat, a white tiled fountain, which at once held bright, inviting water, but had been bleached of its former contents, now only holding a small pool of blood-red elixir. We did not care in the moment, however, so we placed all flammable scraps into that fountain, blazing it a light, illuminating the crevices of that small plaza and all its darkened walls that we could not see previously. Thomas, still in wonder at the unknown symbol we saw earlier, obtained a long piece of wood sticking out of the fire, its tip blazing with orange light. Quickly did he and I, behind him, walk to those doors, and when we were inside the symbol, squinted to see all its quaint features. We both knew what we were seeing was not of any American or Christian or even Spanish origin, but of some unknown, perhaps aboriginal significance, for it was, from our observation, a carving of two arrows pointing to each other, with four fletchings, each with a black circle between those facing arrows. We, in our ignorance, of course, did not have the ability to decipher the symbol, so we left it, walking and scanning the inner walls of the mission to find any more clues to this puzzle. We did find, in addition to some scratch marks, which we foolishly brushed off as the work of the builders of this place, one morning, crudely again, like the symbol above the doors, etched word we saw as a term hitherto unknown to us, but since we knew the word was not Spanish or English descent, we called over John, who was talking and planning with Richard about our situation and next steps, since we knew that he, in his educated vocabulary and life experiences, knew some Navajo due to his exposure to foreign cultures, so that he may be able to tell us what it means. Indeed, when he came over, he was immediately stunned by a sigh as he knew what the word meant. Christ, this doesn't make sense, said John upon first seeing it. Well, what is it? Thomas replied. I do, in fact, know some Navajo, stuttered John, shaking his head in disbelief. And this word, to my knowledge, means something like spirits or ghosts, and not friendly ones, or ones, to say the least. Friendly one, or ones, to say the least. Making us even more creeped out since he never was so nervous in his normal disposition, which did not help out our already fearful situation. John looked at both of us in pursed-lipped smile, as if to calm us down, putting his hands behind our backs, walking us back to the fire. But I did not remember any of the words he spoke. As the malevolent word, we were held in my gaze, as it became harder to see as we were nearing the flame. I've been in many odd, even horrific situations throughout my life. Laughed Richard. But this is one that I cannot reason through. The latter words, he said in a more sober tone. I can second that, but boys, clearly there is not something right going on here. So we're gonna leave when light first hits, spoke John. Oh. We all sincerely nodded in agreement, all wishing to leave the barren desert for some semblance of civilized intimacy and settled civilization in an attempt to distract us from our plight. We shared stories with each other about our lives before our coupling as a party, such as how Thomas was performer for a traveling circus, and how Richard was a cousin of Daniel Boone and was considered in Kentucky to be a master game hunter. John stayed mostly quiet, pondering our next move should be to secure our survival. But it was something that Richard said that still haunts me to this day, even more than some of the transpired events we witnessed and personally experienced. You know, boys, he said, his dark eyes staring into the eternal flame of our fire. I know you think of me as a fool, as one of the acts of Thomas Circus. But I want you to know that I used to be a respectable man, loved by my neighbors, feared by the beasts I hunted. I used to have it all. And something that our dear captain may relate to. I had it all stripped from me. It is no secret that I distrust the savage. But after you've seen what they can do to the ones you love, to the community you serve, then you would understand my position. Of course, they're not all like that yet. Always be vigilant for those that are, he continued. From my experience, while some may claim that war is God, I would say that God himself is war. God is war. Never, never had we three heard anything so philosophical from Dick, as we all just sat there dumbfounded and exhausted, all staring into the flaming embers of the pylon in front of us. "All right, we'll sleep in shifts." Myself starring first, then Richard, then Thomas, and lastly, Neil, declared John. We need all the rest we can get for our journey, especially in our situation. So y'all start sleeping, and I'll tend to the horses one last time. We heeded his wise words, quickly making our cots in makeshift sleeping quarters so we could rest our weary eyes. Speedily did we sleep, slipping into a darkness of consciousness more unknown than the territory that we were currently inhabiting, comforted by the thought that our captain would be the first to watch over us. And the last to allow us to get hurt. My dreams, nightmares at night, were the worst ones I had my entire life. It started from my vague recollection with me standing on a small crested hill, overlooking, well, something along the lines of a native ritual, with naked Navajo men holding torches, chanting and dancing around, well, what seemed to be another native. But this native in the middle, of the circle wasn't normal. Though he was thrashing violently on the ground, I was able to spot some eccentric features. It had long, mangled arms clawed into the ground. Around it, loud shrieks of pain screamed out. Its whole body was very unnatural, almost alien to what we humans can fathom as existing on the same soil as us. Suddenly, it all stopped, all chanting and howling, and they all suddenly turned to me, including the creature. I saw its eyes, a piercing yellow, looking at me upon my small, undefended hill. One native, presumably the chief, pointed at me, and a whole profusion of screams came from all directions. The white-skinned creatures, in contrast with the darker natives, darted right towards me. I ran as fast as I could on a flat surface comparable to the dirt ground of the desert. I then fell, rolling into what seemed to be an eternal dark oblivion. I softly landed in what seemed to be another realm, when cavalry soldiers, Americans, saw me. And when the officer reached his hand out to help me up, he was shot with an arrow, and an entire war party of natives on horseback trampled through the cavalrymen, slaughtering them all. I heard through all the chaos a deep growl behind me, only to be that white creature I saw before. But before I could make out all of its features, or had the chance to fight back, I was, I believe, bitten and swallowed by the creature, the yellow-eyed devil. Oh, hey. He said the word of the title of the book. Engrossed once again into the darkness that I was enveloped. I was enveloped when I first laid to rest. Then I awoke, in a groggy state, my eyes bloodshot from the horrors of my nightmares, which I could only interpret as an omen. I lifted my head up around me to see great calamity. Thomas, my dearest friend, was convulsing on the ground, screeching many profanities in foreign tongues, while John and Richard were pinning him down in a crude attempt to calm him. Thomas abruptly stopped from his violent fit, exhausted by the pretensions and actions of his comrade. Advertisements. He leaned up out of breath, sweat secreting out of every available orifice on his body, his mouth trembling as if he was to say something. He looked down into his skitty bosom and, lifting his blood and wet-stained shirt, revealed there to be a carving, but not one that was man-made. Rather, from what we could gather, all huddling and surrounding our broken and sick friend, was that it resembled a deer's skull, with antlers protruding so far that it scarred Thomas's nipples, the blood being from an etching of red eyes. It was the same monster I saw in my dreams mere minutes before. This is all insanity, I thought. This is all insanity, I thought. But Thomas wasn't the only one of our ever-growing pressing problems. I had noticed that after I awakened, there was a terrible conniving stench that reeked the mission, but I realized that it was not coming from Thomas. Instead, it had been from one of those corners of the place, specifically from the horse pen, with John consoling Thomas. Richard and I were so entranced with the sight that we saw at the pen. There was a blob of meat, bones and organs, tissues, fur, all together melted in the corner, causing a plague-ish vapor to arise from that scent. It was our horses, or what used to be them. Trailing up the wall behind was more blood and scratches, the same scratches that were noticed the day prior. Whatever malevolent force had terrorized the mission's former inhabitants also terrorized not just our horses, who met a terrible, bloody, silent end, but also one of our own crewmates. Whatever beast that did this was able to scale a wall not less than 15 feet, slaughter all 4 of our horses, climb back up in silence. This could not stand. God damn! We're gonna need the Texas Ranger or even the Pinkertons here, exclaimed Richard, his shotgun held in hand, while I grabbed my revolver from my bedside. John had put Thomas to rest in his cot, running over to us to also study the horror What happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? I asked frantically, with an abominable urge to know what transpired by the time I awoke. Richard woke up first, Don explained, staring deep in the assemblage in front of us, yelling that something was wrong with Thomas. You, you of course, looking directly at me, were supposed to take the last watch shift, but something happened to Thomas on his watch, which sent him into a shock. What he saw, I do not know, but I can clearly see what's in front of me right now. John rushed towards his cot, quickly packing his belongings up as if he were to leave us alone at the mission. What are you doing, sir? I asked. He stood up. There's a place called Defiance, an Indian agency south of here. But since we just came from Wingate, I'll retread our steps back there in order to get help and supplies for us. He briskly walked to Richard, putting up clenched fists next to the latter's chest, remarking that Dick would be in charge while he was temporarily gone, and for us not to leave the mission walls unless the most dire circumstances arose. Dick nodded in agreement. Finally, he seemed, other than the philosophical comment he made the night previous, to be fully aware of what is happening. With that, John took his packed belongings, not too much, as he thought to be less than a 2-day trip to Wingate. Dick and I accompanied him to the scratched brown doors that led to the outside heathen world, wishing farewells and good luck to our regal captain. We closed and barred the doors behind him to make sure that no creature to enter. But in the moment, in our shaken minds, we did not remember that the monster could climb over the mission walls. Well, Neil, Dick said to me, take care of your friend for now, and I'll scan the perimeter of any antagonists. It all sounded fine to me, and I discovered that I was more used to taking orders from him than I thought. For the rest of the day, I was both a maid and nurse for Thomas, but I had no regrets about it. He slept for most of the day, periodically jolting up from some unscripted nightmare, scanning Richard's movements as he diligently looked for the beast. The sky, in particular, was also odd. There were now dark, low-hanging clouds. There was no rain to water us dry fauna, which would have been a calming relief. There were seemingly no signs of the creature, with only the occasional whistle echoing through the mission's walls, which we chalked up to as an increase in wind. Night, just as before, found us hiding within the walls of Christ, holding out the hope Our leader would soon arrive with a dozen soldiers to establish our safety. There was likely no sleep for any of us three, for we could not let our guard down, least lest another one of us be afflicted with Thomas's condition. Just as the sun finally set, we heard scratching outside the doors. Richard took up his double barrel and slowly and attentively walked towards the large brown doors, not knowing what horror was outside. He put his ear up to the door where the scratching was at head level. He then knocked back into the darkness that lay outside, the scratching subsiding as if the creature was now in what was our former vulnerable position. More scratches came from not just the door where it did return, but on all sides of the fortification. There was more than one creature. Richard shuffled back to us, stoking the fire so we could see our surroundings better. A rock, a small pebble, was thrown over a wall, landing a couple of feet from us. We didn't know what to do, petrified with fear, a sense of doom hanging over us, those dark clouds before we got into a defensive position. So we faced the corner of two walls, each with Thomas resting between us. I'm gonna need a blanket real quick. Oh man. A howl erupted, then two, then three. There were at least three of them. Dread hung over me, especially since I may have foresaw the menace that was to attack us in the dreams I had the night before. That terror was not one that I wished to face in a non-dream physical world. A rhythmic thumping, just like the tribe in my nightmare, enveloped the environment around us. Dick raised his gun into the air. He shot a loud, deafening noise. All went silent for just a moment. Behind three walls came the sound of scratching, but louder than before. They were climbing. I saw the corner of my eye, long, pale, but seemingly shiny figures with massive claws that began to curl in on themselves. Peering from the top of the walls was the dome of a skull, illuminated brightly by the moonlight beaming through the cracks of clouds. Then, out of sheer horror, those piercing, bright yellow eyes looked back at us as if they were studying us as animals in an exhibit. For a horrifying moment, that all its eyes, those devilish eyes, did was stare, and we stared back. A thump on each side of us was heard, and when we looked, two marauders leaned on their forehands, curled into the dirt ground. We looked back in front of us at our stalker, only to realize that it too was on level with us, or should I say still higher as these yellow-eyed devils were massive. Apart from the yellow eyes came the matted black fur which adorned their pale, bony skin. Hunched over, resting on their clawed hands, their spine nearly protruded from their arched backs, almost like a threatened cat, though they had that cat-like feature. There was no telling what these beings were, since they had a skull like a deer, the back of a cat, the profuse, labored breaths of a tired dog, and the eyes of a biblical devil. Hold on, I'm gonna refresh the chat. Alright. We were nearly cornered, except for behind us, which we slowly and without fail, still staring back at the beast, walked back while dragging Thomas, the middle one, let's call it the Alpha, as it was clearly in charge, shook its head like a deer with flies on its face, howled such a loud concoction of dark symphony that outmatched even Richard's rifle shot. One of the devils charged at Richard, only a few meters away from it, and Dick fired both shots at it, which temporarily inebriated it. The other one came to me, however, was not fazed by the pistol cartridge that I fired, leaving me to jump out of the way of its path. The result was that of it ran right into Richards, pummeling him into the dirt of the ground. I, at the moment, was dragging Thomas to one of the small shacks that lined the walls, while firing my gun to no avail. Richard, terrified of his impending end, took out his hunting knife and, in scene likely resembling what happened to the later pastor, was torn apart by the beasts. The sound of cracking bones and flowing blood echoing through the mission like the howls of those devils. The Alpha, who at this point was not engaged in the struggle, walked to us, though it looked more of a decadent dance. Either way, I was terrified, and just as it was a few feet away from us, a loud jolt of noise fired behind me, wounding the devil. It was Thomas, who used his revolver against it, hitting it in the eye while it screamed out in pain. We could still not comprehend the horror we were witnessing at the sight of a man who, thought not without his faults, was still our friend, was now being gutted like the deer he used to so often hunt in his native state. But before we knew it, more shots rang out from an assailant unknown to us. It was John, who, just like the devils, jumped over the walls, screaming like a banshee, unloading all his ammunition to strike down the foe. We too also engaged in the struggle, firing whatever little shots we had left. Significantly, John blew the head or skull right off of the devils, eating Richard's, shattering the hind legs of the other one in the process. He ran over to us, the Alpha still sorrowing over its wounds, responding to our frantic questions about how he was here too early. with an explanation that he passed down on the way to awakening when it got dark, and ran back to us as quickly as he could. This could mean that there was no army, no cavalry to save us, only ourselves. With this sobering realization, he implored us to escape the mission through the front doors, while he would finish off the other two devils. We obliged to his command, and I put Thomas over my shoulder, his gun in his other hand. We limped closer and closer to the exit, what may be our salvation. Scurly, looking over my shoulders to see the melee, John did finish off the devil with the shot legs. It began it being unstable to travel properly. The alpha not in sight, John poured alcohol out of a bottle into the two dead devils, using a piece of wood from the fire to light them ablaze. In the meantime, since I was the only one capable of doing so, between the two of us, I was removing the barricades that ornamented the locked doors. Once I fully unblocked them, I again took Thomas over my shoulder, looking back to see that John was running towards us. We were safe. A large black husk came crashing down between us in front of John. The alpha came back, likely hot with rage from Thomas' shot, as its yellow-eyed vision, due to the size of it, we could not see the struggle between it and John, but the former bested the latter. Thomas and I could only stare at the devil, as some shots originating from John. It ate into our beloved captain. We needed to run, but we had no mental or physical capability to do so at that moment. Devil looked back at us, peering over its broad shoulder, its eyes reaching mine. The only peculiarity of it was not of its pure rage, but of its distinct color of this specific creature's eye. Sure, they were yellow, already an oddity, but this one was different. It had a mix of that bright yellow, but also with another color akin to a green lightning bolt. Never had I witnessed such a beautiful color on a hideous being. It did not attack us, however, so we took that as a sign of providence for us to run away from these lands, that birth being hitherto unknown to the man of civilization. From the east we came, and to the east we run back to. I went to the west, thinking that it would provide new, bountiful opportunities to me and my companions, but all it provided us was a death sentence and lifelong traumas of the horrors experienced in those impious lands of the unbelievers. Never shall I even mention the direction west again. Never shall I travel west again. Never shall I forget those yellow-eyed devils. And story ended. And that's the end of the story, right there. Alright. So, yeah, that was Yellow-Eyed Devils. Yellow-Eyed Devils by, hold up. The Yellow-Eyed Devils by, hold up. Hold up. Who was this written by? Credit Walker Ramsot. Yeah, shouts to Walker Ramspot for this right here. Well, it is 9 o'clock and man, whatever is going on right now, I have no clue. But what is going down is the stuff, you know, laced with horror and shit. So I'm just gonna end the stream now. You know, just not do anything afterwards. Probably gonna go smoke some more weed. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm just gonna go for it and raid someone. So yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. This is gonna be good. Raid browser. Yeah. I'm running on 2 hours of sleep, baby. Let's do this one. You know? So let's just start the raid. Here we go. Anyways, yeah, while we do this raid, I want to thank you guys for watching my video or stream or Twitch stream, whatever you want to call it. So see you next time. And hopefully you guys like that. So see ya. Why does no one ever stick around?